All right. Welcome to the Ultra High Net Worth Clients Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Broadhead. We started this podcast as a way to create a central resource of the best financial advisor practice growing tips shared by the most outstanding advisors in the industry, of which our guest today was definitely one and continues to be. And now he is doing something that is very exciting on its own. And we'll get into that as well. These outstanding financial advisors and business owners agree to be on the show and provide a ton of value for free, all in the hopes that our audience might learn from their words. My father was a financial advisor, and financial advisors are the main client we serve. So my marketing agency's mission is to help every financial advisor grow their business in an effort to help the world become more financially secure. Today, we have the rare pleasure of talking with an incredible financial advisor and business owner, H. Adam Holt. H. Adam, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
That's it. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's interesting to hear the H Adam. That's something that my mom threw on there just to mess with me. H standing for Heath, but I go by Adam most of the time.
Okay.
But yeah, so most people know me as the founder and CEO of AssetMap, which is a technology platform for financial advisors to help accelerate the advice conversation by using visuals to take what we did in 5 to 10 hours of financial planning behind the scenes to do it in 30 minutes live in front of the client in this kind of renewed remote screen sharing environment. And that's a practice that I actually designed, almost 20 years ago as a financial planner, where I built a practice in Philadelphia, an asset management practice, about $1 billion of AUM, and a pretty sizable estate planning and corporate guidance firm. And it was built around the pretense of, if we could visualize everybody's life, we could just get to the problem points faster. And that's how I grew the firm so well. And it's kind of showed it on the main stage in 2012, and it went viral. So it's fun to kind of live in this world of helping financial advisors grow their practice, as well as still keep my fingers in the business as a recovering CFP.
That's awesome, man. That is a mouthful. So much to dig into there. So I usually like to start at, your origin. How did you get into this wild industry?
Well, the industry of financial planning / insurance salesperson. Well, it's funny because back in 1998, I had decided I didn't want to work for the federal government anymore. 2 years out of college, I liked people, not computers. I liked actually, having more an entrepreneurial versus a government mindset. And I went to a job fair and I found this financial planning company, and they gave me a job. I thought that was pretty cool. It turns out I was a life insurance agent. I had to sell life insurance for the next couple of years and struggled along like almost everybody does with no natural market. And about 2 years into it, I realized that what people were really asking for was analytical guidance, right? They wanted confidence in their buy. And so I used financial planning as a way to engage people back in 2000. And I had a lot of success actually placing insurance, annuities, and investment management using that process. So big surprise, financial planning wound up being my sales enablement process early on, as I would just engage people for free financial planning. And then of course I'd solve all the problems I had discovered. So, you kind of accelerate that years forward. I got some notoriety, got hooked up with two of the top estate and business planners in that organization, and was able to run their investment business until we figured out that these guys, I could succeed them and take over their practice. So I got the accelerant, Chris, because I had created a little bit of a name for myself, and then, hooked up with gentlemen who had created a lot of success, and then was able to leverage their experience and expertise to create an even bigger firm.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. I worked for the federal government for 2 years before I was like, no mas, and went out on my own. So
we'll leave that one to our smirks, as to why that's possible.
Yeah. So wild coincidence there. So how did you get connected with these two estate planners, and how did you make a name for yourself in order to get on their radar? It sounds like.
Well, it's funny, it's interesting how serendipity kind of plays out. At the time in 2000, just before that, it was not the time to start an investment practice. If you remember, Y2K was happening. Also, the internet bubble destroyed pretty much 40% of the stock market value by March. or for the ensuing months. And so a lot of people who had gotten kind of comfortable with the NASDAQ just earning 20, 25% returns year over year, everybody wanted to get into investment management. It seemed like an unbelievable opportunity. They were two successful gentlemen that had actually merged their practices and complementary skills. One was an unbelievable finder, one was an unbelievable technical salesperson, both very successful in their own right. And they realized very early they needed some youth on the team. I think the reason I got picked is because I had created some level of success using financial planning to place insurance and investment products. At the time, that was really how all of us were compensated back then. It was A share, B shares, C shares, commissions from annuities and life insurance. And you pretty much were measured on how much revenue or asset gathering you could create. And because I was generating that as a young person, that's how it stood out. So there's no question that when they were seeking someone, they were looking for someone who wasn't going to be a dependency on them, someone who had created some level of success because they were really more afraid of having to carry somebody. And it's interesting because this is a real big issue today in this space where you have successful financial advisors that are looking for next gen potential managers or take my D and C clients, or maybe you're a successor, you could eventually buy me out of the practice. Is how do you bring them in without basically paying them a salary? They have to be able to feed themselves. And so it's an interesting challenge these days.
Mhm. Hmm. Okay. And so it sounds like, you're a visual guy, and you concluded early on that the more easy to understand you made this for your prospects, for potential clients, the more likely it is they would close.
Mm.
How did you figure out how to actually, like, live visualize this data? Like, it sounds like you're doing this on a sales call or a sales meeting, right?
Yeah.
How did where's the genesis of this idea? And it's a
So,
good idea.
thank you. I appreciate it. Well, with almost 2 million people in AssetMap, I'm not the only one. So the interesting thing is how nobody had really solved this problem before. So here's the funny thing. All of us in financial advice, we all have one thing in common, just one thing. And that is that we are required, both from a regulatory standpoint as well as a good consultative business perspective, of knowing our client. We must all do fact finding. How you do it is across the board different. How you account for it for regulatory standards, suitability is all different, but it's something that we all must do. The difference is that I found that when I was collecting the data, if I gave it back to the clients and prospects visually, it gave me permission to talk about all of it. I now had permission to explore everything. Here's an example. So if I were to interview you about whether we're a good fit to working together, I got to tell you, look, the first thing I need to know is what's going on in your life. Okay, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your spouse. Tell me about your kids. What's going on? Do you have business partners? What's your business? Right. So I'm writing down all this stuff, but typically I'm behind like a notepad. The client doesn't see any of this stuff. They're just divulging verbal vomit of their life to somebody who's, I don't know, doing something with it. You tell me about your income. What kind of work are you doing? Tell me about your benefits. What about your retirement plans? Tell me about your assets. What about your liabilities? You doing any insurance? Have you done anything like that? What about your et cetera, right? So I ask all these questions. You got a mortgage, you got a house, et cetera. We would take that information and for the client, it goes into this black box. Supposedly, my advisor here knows something about me, which they're going to use all that information to tell me something that I can do differently, better than I'm doing it today, or how they can help me, or how they can protect me, whatever it is. Okay. By the way, this is true for every financial professional. A CPA has to do this, an attorney, an insurance agent, an investment advisor, all of them, CFP, fee-based financial planner, everybody must do a fact-finding process. And today, to prove best interest advice, must be able to actually provide this in an audit too. We have to be able to prove that you did it. What we figured out is that if we took this mass amount of information, regardless of complexity, and created a structured visualization with rules around it, and then gave it back to them on a screen, all of a sudden I can now ask, wait, why'd you do this? Have you thought about doing this? And so over years, even though the technology now allows us to overlay what your peers are doing or model different types of scenarios, or what would happen if we just divorced this family, or what happens if we had a loss of life event? What would happen? And
Mm.
it allows us to have a conversation piece, Chris, that allows the advisor to apply what I call the original AI, which is advisor intelligence to the client's life in real time. So if it makes me look good as a financial advisor, do you think I'm going to earn trust and I'm going to accelerate the sales process? Absolutely. And what was happening is that in addition to solving the problem that the client came for, which might have been retirement or education funding or just estate planning, now we would uncover there's 5 other problems I got to fix here and I can't unsee it. So the key is that once I point out that several things are broken, I get to actually help them fix multiple things. And that's why the revenue generation was so significantly higher, because standard process we all have to do, fact finding, is now interactive and they can participate in it.
Mm.
That changed the game, because in the past we would just deliver an 80-page report and say, hey, listen, you're kind of messed up or you're on track and you can maybe tweak it. The client's not reading that 80-page report. They're looking for the conclusion. The analysis is for us in the back end to get confidence around what we're going to recommend. But when I can just talk about your life, hey, we should just triage this stuff. We fix this, and then we'll do the analysis afterward.
Mhm. So, was this kind of did this idea evolve as you were building your practice, or did it kind of hockey stick your practice into the stratosphere?
So interesting you asked that. So in 2005, I submitted this to my compliance team. All financial advisors are part of some kind of compliance organization. In 2006, I got
And they
approved.
welcomed it openly, and they
No,
said,
they
"Go
didn't.
for it."
It
I'm
took like,
joking. I know they didn't.
oh, okay. It took years. It took years. In 2006, I got compliance approval to
Mm.
use it with our clients, and I tripled my production that year. And
Wow.
then the next year, I tripled it again. And then the next year, I tripled it again. And that's why by 2009, I was in my mid 30s. I didn't have a family and I had more revenue than I had ever seen in my life. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with it? So I decided to start a tech company because I figured, well, the problem was, interestingly enough, that it was taking full-time employees to create these visualizations for every client.
Mm.
And they were bespoke. Everyone was unique and different and changed constantly. Whether they had trusts or kids or businesses, the complexity started really getting crazy. And so I needed to build a technology platform that would be able to just build them bespoke in minutes. And today we've gotten it down to, you can build an asset map. You can send a link to the client. They can build it on their phone. And now I can show up to the meeting and just be like, okay, there's your life visually. Let's talk about this, and do the modeling in 30 seconds. So financial planning should be literally hit of a button now. And we can build it together, but it's pre-built. So I think the key for us is how do you just accelerate the time to get to a really honest conversation where we can, see one client a day, or we can see 15, and we can have an intelligent advice conversation where I look great. Like I'm the driver of this awesome Porsche, and you remember the driver and the experience. And I think that's the key for all of us that are thinking about competing with direct to consumer technology, is how you can add value when the cost of doing business is zero and on demand. And that's going to be an interesting challenge for most of us in financial advice. Is we've built a full infrastructure and maybe even a fee or revenue model on clients staying with us long term. And I think that's going to see some pressure.
Mhm. Wow. So, I haven't had the pleasure to use your tool yet, but I imagine that, once the prospect or client, sees this in action, they're just like, well, now I understand and now I see it. Uh, what are the next steps? So it seems to have some sort of automatic closing effect, I would imagine.
Auto closing. That's pretty funny. I tend to here's the because I've been in the field and I understand sales. I What I wanted to make in the product, and granted, this company has over 50 employees full time that are thinking about what's the next phase of advice delivery. And we're going to build all kinds of other fun features into AssetMap. But for me, there's a couple of edicts. Number one, we run with a guiding design principle called Simple Rich. And it's something I came up with a bunch of years ago, which is if you're going to be a professional and you're going to deliver something, it better be professionally and technically defensible, right? It cannot be Fisher Price, but it has to be simple. Otherwise, everybody's attention deficit disorder is going to just jump into the room and nobody's going to be paying attention by page 2. So the requirement is that everything we generate has to work on one page. So any concept like a financial plan, one page, education funding, one page, balance sheet, one page, asset map, one page, et cetera, et cetera. If it doesn't fit on one page, it's not going to be on our platform. And the reason that's important is because we need to have episodic discussions. For example, you know what? I ran an analysis, Chris, that basically runs an analysis on 6 common calamities that we all potentially could have. I want to know whether you can weather it. If you need to write a check for liquidity, you have a long-term disability, loss of life, long-term care, you live too long, or we have a liability attack. Can you handle it? Red, yellow, green. Don't give me the numbers. I just want to know if it's bad, worse, or it's okay. In a sense, we want to tee up every advisor to have that conversation and then just shut up, be quiet. Do you want me to address these things or educate you on how they work or just ignore it? Most people, normal people, would like to see the reds and say, well, what does it mean if it's red? Well, in this case, Chris, it means that God forbid you were disabled, you'd probably lose the house. Is that a scenario that you would like me to attack? Or do you want me to dismiss it and snooze that alarm? Most people would say, no, wait. You can actually get me to green or yellow? Yep. You want me to pursue it? Yep. Do I make money when I solve that problem? Yes, I do. And everyone wins. So in the sense of saying, are we basically creating an automated sales machine? No, we're basically putting the elephant in the room in front of you. And then allowing you to say, you know what? I think I have a solution, or, you know, it's not a work. Let's move past it. The key is that when the light is blinking, someone needs to be able to say, hey, I'm on it. Do you want me to address it or not? So in a strange way, attacking advice in this way allows us to accelerate the time to say, yeah, prioritize it, don't prioritize it. Instead of confusing the crap out of everybody and just saying, do you trust me to take, like, I don't think most clients really understand the retirement analysis. They just want to know, are we going to be okay? And what should we do about it? Can you handle it? I think that's really the key.
Yeah. Awesome. So you seem to have an almost like inherent understanding of the sales process, the making things clear process, needs in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Where did these ideas come from? Were you born this way? Did you have a mentor?
Did
you read a bunch of great books? How did this happen?
Yeah, I'm an alien, dude. Look, you know, everybody's got their kind of journey that got them here. There's a couple things that were probably pivotal in this journey. The first is I've always been artistic. I've always cared a lot about design, and I wanted to be an architect. So I pursued art, composition, design, communication, visual communication. And so coming into this, I think unlike most of my technical peers, I came in with this like empathetic, what's the viewer going to experience? What is the consumer's side, not what's the advisor side. And becoming a technical advisor gave me the advisor side too. But I had spent a bunch of time as a kid, 16, 17 years old, going to Tony Robbins events because my mom, who was a realtor, took me to these events and I got indoctrinated into that whole spot. And during that process, I wound up actually volunteer staffing for his major events, the large ones around the country. So obviously I learned motivation and inspiration and behavioral stuff. And it was a great outlet for me at a very young age. And there's no question it influenced me in many ways, especially on the communication side. But interestingly enough, because of my art background, I wound up getting exposed to mind mapping. And mind mapping is the process of taking notes visually, almost cartoon style. And so it was
Hmm.
those tenets that I used in creating AssetMap as a construct that would be universal, right? So, how do you actually take this complicated data in finance and make it work for every single person? You have to put rules around it, right? Assets can only be here, and incomes can be here, and insurances can be here spatially. So, there, I needed to understand that before I could build it successfully. And it's one of the reasons I think we haven't seen a real competitor is because you just need to understand too many disparate things. And that's been my weird, unique mashup.
Hmm. Wow. Another Tony Robbins success story.
You can take credit.
No, I think he's got enough credit, Adam.
Okay,
We'll
yeah, all
give
right.
this one to you. You
Thank you. My
you're a
mom will take the
hardworking.
credit. How about that? My mom will.
There you go.
You
There
can
you go. Your
trust me.
mom.
No question.
So, um, you're growing your practice. It sounds like you're tripling every year. You decide like, all right, that challenge is done. You built asset map. At what point do you go asset map full time and kind of sunset your practice?
I would say I think I really made that shift in 2019 after I had gotten to a place where almost as a kind of a challenge to myself was I was reading these books and I always had a personal coach. So that's another thing. That's one of the things I kind of took from Robbins is having a mentor was
Mm,
important. So I pretty much always had some form of business or personal coach on my personal payroll, if you will,
mhm.
because I never had a boss. And as you know, the problem with being an entrepreneur is that you're accountable to no one but yourself, and that means you let yourself get away with all kinds of bullshit.
Oh man. Yep.
And so I knew that I had to have someone holding me accountable, even though sometimes I didn't even listen to them. But I use it as a sounding board. And the reason why that's valuable is because in 2019, I was forced to give up my licenses if I wanted to raise money for the company. And so that was a
Mm.
watershed moment
Oh
because
wow.
the kind of regulation you have with securities professionals is I couldn't really raise money in this large company that's been growing unless I gave it up. And so in 19, I gave up all my securities licenses, which was a huge hit because, I'd given up my AUM recurring because I had to. But that was an interesting moment because I had gotten myself to basically one day of work a week, one day of, yeah, right. One day a week of work, met all my clients on Tuesday. And then the other days I was really running asset map anyway.
Uh,
So as a natural born worker, I can't not work 60 hours a week. I'm obsessive that way. And I don't see myself ever retiring, Chris. I'll just find a different thing to work on. So, um, yeah, so
wow.
that's kind of where I am right now.
Okay. And just I mean that takes some courage. You're throwing off those golden handcuffs that you worked so hard to build for, you know, something different.
I think for me it was, and it's funny. I was just interviewed on a podcast about kind of meaning and principles and your big why and understanding that. And I think it's for all of us. We got to challenge ourselves, even large or small, even small questions. Right? You're driving, like, what is my why? Maybe you think about it. Just putting some time on it, I think, is important. Or even asking your partner, "What's your why?" Right? Does it align with me? But I think the value of that for me, I really wanted to create something that had longer lasting, bigger purpose, bigger impact. And the technology platform gave me the opportunity to do that. We're serving several thousand advisors around the world now, helping them, touch over 2 million lives. I think that's pretty cool. I couldn't have done that in my own personal practice,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
without an enormous amount of work. So I think the leverage that I got was inspiring and kind of appealing. Who knows what the next project's going to be, but I think this one's not over. Don't get me wrong, but those are, I think, things that get me fired up these days.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned um a mentor, business coach. I have one as well. I don't know how anyone who's an entrepreneur survives without that. You just kind of like I feel like you just spiral and bad things would happen. How often do you meet this person, and how did you find them?
My history is once every 2 weeks, so twice a month. And I've started recently creating community groups of like-minded leaders in some regard that I get together with. And I have a pretty strong community these days. I reach out to people, probably 10 to 15 people a week just to connect, check in. And it's been one of those things that's kept me sane, kind of connect on issues that you're dealing with someone who can relate. Uh, as well as also be there for other people, because it's nothing quite that gives you gratitude like helping other people and getting them over their challenges. But I think for me, the coaching has come a couple different ways. I tend to switch every 2 to 3 years, mostly to get just diversity of perspective.
Mm,
Some have come from network, some come from other clients. Everybody has a good experience. Um, Most recently, one came from literally practically a cold solicitation, and I was just the right time, right place. I'm like, "Yeah, let's change it up."
yeah.
He was with me for 2 years. So, yeah, so I think that there's all kinds of ways, but the best, as you know, is almost always referral. Someone who's
Mhm.
had good experience. I think it's really important getting that alignment, because if you're messing with them, or you're just kind of running last minute to try to get ready for them, it shows you're really not committed, and I think that's an important aspect of it. I've had moments like that for myself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've, my, business coach actually referred me to my therapist as well,
There you go.
and you get to a point with your business coach, at least I did, and he's like, "Chris, that's not a business problem. That's, it's an
Yeah.
emotional thing. I got a person for you." And I was like, "Let's go."
Yeah, right. Look, growth happens in lots of ways, and sometimes in ways that we don't expect or know to ask the questions about. So I think that's a really
Yeah,
smart move on your part.
yeah,
Uh,
thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
It's
Totally.
been great because I always felt like my business coach, I was like, you're like half therapist, half like business therapist." Like,
Yeah,
and
I hear
he's
that.
like, "I can help you with all this, but like this stuff, you should talk to a specific expert for that."
Yeah. It's interesting that the business coach probably charges 5 times what the therapist charges,
Yeah.
pure hourly rate. So it's true. It's a better use of time to get the emotions straight, uh,
Yeah.
with someone at a lower rate, and maybe even more skilled or credentialed, ironically.
Yeah, yeah. Someone legit, someone like who went to school for this.
Right. Not another entrepreneur who's good at selling you on their hourly rate as being 5,000 bucks
Yeah.
a quarter or a day. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty funny.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sure.
Awesome. So then, you're fully focused on AssetMap. Um, how do you grow that? And are you doing visualizations for financial advisors, explaining them akin to how you explained it to clients? How are you getting on people's maps to grow AssetMap?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, as a technology company, you've got to get compliance approved with almost all of the major outlets, because it's being seen by clients. So it's got to go through the whole infosec policy. It's got obviously a significant amount of data on it that's sensitive. So there's a lot of scrutiny around getting approved for use by most advisors. Right now, we have about 32 broker dealers using AssetMap. We're about to make some huge announcements, actually, this summer, that we're excited. It's going to double our total addressable market. And the way it's word of mouth, believe it or not. That being said, more business is coming in from Facebook and Instagram than you would believe. About 70% of our inbound leads, and this is a real kind of heads up to advisors, if you can target and put a good digital marketing strategy together, 70% of our inbound advisors, well over 300 a month, are actually seeing Asset Map and signing up this way through social media. So it's interesting to me. I never thought this would work, to see how effective different social outlets are for putting the right stuff in front of the right people with the algorithms that they have. But we've also had growth overseas. We have UK growth and South Africa growth, Canada. We're a multi-currency GDPR platform that can handle any language. So we're very we've kind of focused more on, can we have the conversation that every culture is having, fact finding and mathematical analysis fast in a visual format that every cave person can understand. And I think that that's what I mean by simple rich, of course, but it has to be flexible to handle the nuances of terminology in New Zealand versus, UK. And that's really kind of where we continue to focus. So the answer to your question is, we're going to look to continue to dominate the financial advisory space here. We're really committed to it because we're all recovering advisors. We value that role. Um, but I think you'll see our bigger vision is to put an asset map on every fridge of the planet so that you create accessibility. Turns out that the biggest challenge that every advisor needs to pay attention to is not so much helping their current client understand, it's helping our clients' partners and spouse who are completely underengaged. Eventually, they're
Mhm.
going to wind up making those decisions for where the money goes, doesn't go. And if you're not paying attention to them right now, they have huge decision leverage. So let's engage them. Let's bring them into the conversation by demystifying it visually, saying, hey, I created this for you. Let's talk about it. It's a really big opportunity that most advisors just ignore because they're just talking to the maybe one party in a household that's actually interested in the topic, but it's a mistake. And so this is one of the things we've been thinking about is how do you just bring them into the fold?
Mhm. Yeah, that's really smart. I think that's an easy thing to overlook that is extremely important aspect of the relationship. Um, awesome, awesome. Well, that's you have you've blazed a very interesting and inspiring and successful path, my friend.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
I do want to respect your time. I know we're already over, so I will steer the interview towards our final question, which is an open-ended question. You can take it in any direction you like.
Okay.
And the question is, what are you working towards?
I think for me, it's been really interesting to talk a lot about fatherhood and leadership and the mashup of those two things. And so my buddy and I, Derek Notman, is also a founder, CEO, also an advisor recovering, put together this group called Rebel Dads, REBL Dads. And it started by putting together a trip to Necker Island with Richard Branson, which we did in January with a bunch of other dads who said, we want to find a way to have balance in our lives and spend time with what really matters. And it's been a really interesting journey. Now, we just created this whole program around it, which we're going to start to roll out to people who are interested in the topic of how do I get co-mentorship mastermind around being as good a father as I am a leader and as passionate I am about business. How do I make sure I'm creating a lasting impact there? So I'm really interested in this I have a 13-year-old child. How can we, get the mentorship that's kind of missing in most of our lives if we had a father that's involved or not involved, whatever it might be. Since we're all kind of spread out all over the planet, we kind of miss those opportunities I think maybe our predecessors had. And fatherhood is the ultimate leadership, isn't it? Kind of like, what's the
Mhm.
reputation of my family, of our family name, and am I setting up these kids for success or just dependency? Am I spending the time with them or just my business? And I think those are really opportunities. So I'm really intrigued in that at 50, kind of milestone moment for me to try to make sure that I'm present there as well. So that's my big project. I think that's going to take a lot of my time and energy going forward.
That's great. Did you turn 50 recently?
Yeah, this year I did.
Oh, okay. Happy belated.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you can celebrate it. I'm not celebrating it. I guess I made it this far. That's fine.
Heck yeah. Awesome. And where can our audience find out more about you and Asset Maps?
For the most part, you can Google Asset Map or Adam Holt, Adam Holt, as you said. Very good. And you can find me. LinkedIn is really the best way to communicate with me for anybody who's looking to start a conversation. I do read them. So I appreciate what you're doing, Chris, and bringing value to our community of financial advisors and business owners. I think it's great, great outlet, and I appreciate the effort you've made to help people unspoken and unseen. So that's really cool.
Hey, I appreciate you saying that. This is as fun and valuable for me as it is for anyone that listens to it. I selfishly get an insane amount of benefit from
I'm
these
sure.
just having conversations with, incredible folks like yourself
Thank you.
it's the best part of my day. So, it is not entirely selfless.
Very well. That's great. Very cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, to everybody out there listening, thanks so much for tuning in and keep on growing out there, everybody. See ya.